Welcome back, everyone. It's a pleasure to be able to speak with you. Thank you for joining us. I hope you're doing well today. I'm Henrik, and you are listening to Red Ice Radio. We are independent, a truth-seeking endeavor that is dedicated to informing you about how the globalists, the elite, are seeking to transform the world and us, shaping it in their image by destroying human nature and the natural inherent resistance and rebellion that arise to counteract these life-choking activities. We discuss these aspects and much more from many different angles, the historical view, the conspiracy behind it, but also the esoteric and exoteric application. We are indeed in times of grave danger, but also time of great opportunity. RedIceCreations.com is the website. Dennis Fetcho is with us on the program today. He specializes in aerospace, defense, and telecom, but you probably know him best for being the gentleman behind the Illuminatus Observer and the host of Inside the Eye Live. Dennis is an American expatriate living in Amman, Jordan, who brings insights on geopolitics, Zionism, conspiracy history, finance, Middle East politics, and much more. We'll begin to talk about ISIS today, but we have a lot on our plate, discussing organized media as warfare, the situation in Ukraine, Russian nationalism, and the situation in America, and of course the problem with Zionism. Hey Dennis, welcome back. Nice to speak with you again. How have you been since we last spoke? It's been, I guess, almost 3 years ago. Oh my, time goes by quick, doesn't it?
It really has. You know, I think I was on your show to start the 2011 year, believe it or not. And what's interesting about that, Henrik, is when your show came out on, what was it, January 2nd, 2011, I had also recorded a slot in October for a Cult of Personality. And both of you guys launched the interview on January the 2nd, and you should have just seen the numbers on my blog that month, because you had both of you guys launching a pretty big interview on the exact same day to start the new year.
Good stuff. Kicking off in the right direction. Yeah, that's good.
that made for a great first quarter.
All right. No, very good. We have, of course, a lot of different topics to talk about here today. Certainly no shortage of insane games going on at top level to kind of try to deconstruct and well, figure out what's going on. But I wanted to begin to ask you a little bit about, I guess, where you are in the world, considering that you're in the Middle East, how you're feeling about being there right now, considering everything that is going on. As usual, of course, we know that certain things are ramped up in the media. We understand that it's, when they make it seem like it's a war zone, it's actually pretty calm conditions. And it's kind of the reverse in some cases where there actually is real stuff going on. They usually kind of cover it up and try, no, it's all fine, nothing's happening. But where you're at, how do you feel things is going on right there now at the moment, Dennis?
Yeah, right now I'm in Amman, Jordan, and the political climate is pretty relaxed, to be honest with you. There's not a whole lot of protests going on. We had some protests over the summer about Palestine. But overall, I mean, it's difficult, obviously, for the people, but it's difficult for people really all over the world when you think about it nowadays. So there is some stress within the population politically. I have been going back and forth to Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is just booming right now. The government there has got too many dollars. So they're dumping literally many tens of billions of dollars into their local economy, trying to get churn on their revenues, on the income streams going, because to create opportunities for their people. And that's a very smart thing to do. It's unfortunate that our governments are not doing that, and they're wasting our money on, wars, as we've seen the last 10, 12 years now. Relative to Iraq, I've been to Iraq a couple times. Been to Saddam's house, so I've been into the very areas where now they don't call it ISIS, by the way. Locally, they call it Daesh, D-A''ASH. So they're using an Arabic term. Local media is either using IS, Islamic State, or Daesh. Just so you know, they are not bastardizing the ISIS name like they're doing in the Western press.
Really interesting. Well, I heard the connection about, of course, there was some woman talking about the the intelligence services of Israel. Wait a minute, no, I'm screwing that one up now. But ISIS was, of course, a hint going back to something that Israel has created, nonetheless. Did you hear about that one? Let me pull that up here a second.
Yeah, I think it's still Israel, stupid.
It's amazing, It's I think this was a while back, of course, but okay, well, they might not want to put their own kind of moniker on this so openly, but who knows, right? In terms of what they're thinking about, what they can do. But Jordan, obviously close neighbors to Syria. Is there any kind of overlap there in terms of the ISIS situation overall, or the Ash? No.
See, this is what happened. If you follow military planning, if you follow military upgrades, back in 1997 through 2003, what the United States did is they embarked on a $455 million border control network for the Jordanian government along the Syrian border. Well, that was kind of like laying the groundwork, the defensive groundwork, which would then become the war against Syria. Because they knew that once they launched the war on Syria, you're going to have a weakening of the border environment. You could have extremist elements coming into Jordan. So they created, again, that border zone all the way back, started in, I think, 1997. I think it finished in 2003, maybe as late as 2005. So the writing was on the wall for an attack on Syria as early as then, 1997, 1998, when they started to build this whole network. So as far as the extremists coming in, this has not been a problem. There was a couple tanks, actually, armored vehicles caught in a little mountain pass up in the north, but that was isolated pretty darn fast. The security network here is very strong, and they took that out immediately. They've been rounding up some people here locally for supporting the various, just call them insurgents or just whatever you want to call them, really. They're invaders by proxy, really. So there's been some of that going on. There's rumors, of course, of training of the various elements up there. So there's trainings purportedly going on. I heard one case where the British Embassy and the U.S. Embassy ordered over 100 buses from a local bus company. Those are being driven out to training areas, ostensibly to train U.S. and British troops, but you have to wonder. What else is going on? There's not been a whole lot, really, to be honest, as far as coming into Jordan. I think the Syrians would have more of a complaint about Jordan sending people into Syria more than the other way. But we do have close to 1 million refugees scattered throughout various camps here. That's a big problem, of course, but it's also big business, which I hate to see. But let's be honest, if you're housing 1 million people, that's big business. If you profit 25 cents on 1 million people a day on a meal, how much money are you making?
Yeah, well, exactly. I mean, we even have the same thing in Sweden, for Christ's sake, where all the immigration that we're getting, there's a whole industry there of, housing and clothing the immigrants coming in. So they know about the business aspect of that too,
Yes, it's big business, and those who are behind it understand that business, and they position themselves to benefit off of the policies that maybe their compadres across the aisle are putting together for them.
Oh, so, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, watch which hands are certainly washing the other hand.
Yep. The original ISIS, here it is, I screwed it up earlier, but Israeli Secret Intelligence Service. It was a short video back from the 1990s on C-SPAN, actually, where an analyst was discussing Israeli intelligence, and the Israeli Secret Intelligence Service, ISIS, actually referred to the Mossad. So there you go. Don't know if there's any connection there, but there certainly seems to be indication, of course, that this is very timely. It's perfect that the ISIS arrived on the stage when they did, and in terms of the intervention that they're seeking to now do in Syria. And I think Israel even shot some planes down here. It was earlier today, I believe. They shot down a Syrian warplane, which they claimed acted in a threatening manner, so.
Heck, if you blink at them wrong, that's a threatening matter. Come on, these.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
If you look at them wrong, it's like, why are you threatening me? Excuse me?
Oh, boy. Well, we'll talk a little bit more about some of that later, too, by the way. But let's just kind of we don't have to recap, but let's kind of put things in perspective in terms of what we talked about last time. I mean, you've been doing a lot on the, Qaballah, the Hermetic Qaballah, kind of numerology and all that stuff. Where are you at in this research, and how has things developed for you in this department, Dennis?
Well, for the most part, the research I spent from 1996 to 2000, say 10, putting all my research down, and then that became the 200 some odd stories or articles up there on the Illuminatus Observer. So, I mean, I still do some research, but the vast majority of the actual formulas, the techniques and the styles, they're already there. They're put down for anybody that would like to come and learn about how the esoteric secret or nature of English works. It's all there for you. The philosophies, the styles, the techniques, everything is there. To put it now, it needs to be, as you know, it needs to be aggregated into a marketable product, really. Because people like that rather than the blog system where you take one story and you can't see where one story is joined to the other when it's really so disjointed as a blog format really is. But still I do work, trying to just find some various things. Every now and then insights come to me about various words. I can't give you on the top of my head, but things still come to me because it's just part of you after you've done it that long. It's just kind of natural. So not a whole lot of new stuff, but there are things in the works, as you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's for another time and day. But still, the knowledge, what I have, I believe is still one of the more cutting-edge Kabbalistic works, Hermetic Kabbalah works on the web today. And to this day, it's the numbers are still there. Believe it or not, Henrik, I haven't done anything there for quite some time over at the Illuminatus Observer. But the numbers are pretty much still there, so people still are responding.
Yeah, well, that's good. Well, so is there any, kind of reason for why you left it for a little bit? I mean, we kind of talked about this a little bit earlier before we came on here, but there's just so many things going on. There's so many things that are so pressing and urgent in the geopolitical world, and there's so many things that are, threatening everybody's way of life, really, and certain things you kind of just have to, although they're very interesting, they're very it's just highly entertaining to a certain extent to really dive into the esoteric and all that, but there's so much important stuff going on, so it almost feels sometimes you have to put some of the other things to the side to kind of focus at what is more imminent and more pressing, because otherwise, if we don't start speaking up about these things, they will completely run us over, I believe.
Yeah, I agree with that assessment. I think we're really involved in an information war now. There are certain elements on this planet that don't like us. These are elitist style, Illuminati, whatever you want to call it, Anglo-Zionists. I don't care what you want to call them. That's your choice, what you want to call them. I just want the choice to call them what I want to call them equally. But these people, they don't like us. There is an intellectual war out there and information war. And we need to create, quite frankly, the constituency, the political space for elements of light to work. And as we need, especially as you know, since 9/11, all the BS that went down with that, we need to create that political space. Really, it's space for elements of light. I just said that, but it's important. These elements of light that are working in the shadows as well as the other side of the shadows, they need space to work. And the only way that's going to happen is if people like you, like me, and others like us are out there working just as hard as these elements working to control the planet are working. And it's a case where we have to get out there and compete. As long as we have this ability, and the internet gives us that ability, and we need to use the weapons and the tools available to us to just get our side of the story out, create the political constituency. And quite frankly, Henrik, I think it's working. It may not be as fast as we'd like, but you don't need to win over 100% of the people. You really need to win over 12 to 15% of the people. Mm-hmm. And that is happening. It's happening in France. It's happening in the Ukraine. You've got a rising vocal voice in America, although America is still very much asleep. It's happening in Spain. It's happening all over the world where people are waking up. And they may not agree with us entirely, but there's lots of overlapping philosophy, lots of overlapping efforts, and every little bit helps. And what I try to tell people is very important. I said, look, a lie needs to be told 1,000 times more than the truth, because the truth, once it reverberates, it can't go away. So we just need to keep telling the truth. We don't need to have the same number of impressions that lies need. We don't need to dominate the media to the degree that it is dominated by the Jewish side of our societies. Let's be honest, they control 93% of our media. So they are a problem, since they are not withholding their obligation, which is to act as a responsible fifth column towards the government. They're just hand in hand with the government. Their lies help sell 9/11. Their lies help sell the Iraq War. Their lies are helping sell so much turmoil across this planet. So we have to compete. Again, we don't need to tell the truth doesn't have to be said as often as the lie. And that's our great benefit, by speaking openly and being truthful and being accurate. That will resonate and reverberate much more powerful than the lie.
Yeah, it's true. It's something that they have to keep up doing all the time, and it's a hell of an effort. I mean, my God, how much don't they have to do to just keep the lies rolling all the time? And I know that people sometimes they kind of revert back if they keep getting hammered with the lies, as you say. But in most cases, once you kind of opened up that door a little bit, it's like it remains open. I mean, and another thing we talked about too, by the way, is also people's ability to just kind of, or that people are in a position of, let's say, holding a lot of information or whatnot, letting people go and kind of, investigating a lot of different topics and letting people get their own time with some of these things and realize that it's, it can be a lot of fun to discover knowledge and information and ultimately truth as well, But I think that everyone, given enough time, will come around and see, what's most important and whatnot, because it's way too much bickering and infighting and groupings between, in this particular field, I feel as well, which is really a disservice. I think that, as you said, focus on the points of agreements primarily where it overlaps, and a concerted effort pulling together, organizing in that capacity to try to, defeat the enemy. Otherwise, I mean, we're going to spend all our time infighting. Nothing is going to get done, and they couldn't be happier because of it. What do you make of everything that's going on with that?
I agree with you. I was just thinking just today, in fact, remember the Bulgaria bus bombings?
Yeah.
Well, what happened was, or let's say the gas attack in Ghouta in Syria. Well, what the media, this Jewish organized media, can do is when they have a particular story they want to sell, they can roll that story out and put it on virtually every single radio and television and cable slot at the same time. Imagine the power that has when it goes out, and this is like shock and awe media warfare, because that's what they're doing. This is shock and awe media warfare using the Kabbalistic techniques that you can learn about through work like I do. Now, imagine it just goes out, boom, it hits. And yet here you're out, you're doing your thing. We're both you're professional. You're making money doing what you do. I'm professional. I'm not making so much, but still I'm professional. And there's me, you, and there's many others like us. We don't ever coordinate our storylines. You know what I mean? We don't coordinate to the degree that they do.
Yeah.
This is another, besides what you've mentioned, this is another lacking element. There, in my opinion, to take this, boy, it's kind of turned into a media strategy show here, but to take this alternative media and really make it more powerful, is there needs to be a loose, let's call it a grouping of people, whatever you want to call it there, that agrees to collaborate and launch particular stories at the same time, because then I'm hitting, let's say, 20,000. You're hitting 100, 150,000. This guy over here is hitting 15,000. That guy over there, he's hitting 12,000. Well, you add it all up. Well, guess what? We can hit 500,000 people in 1 week.
Yeah.
But we're not doing that.
I guess certain things, certain topics does kind of, you watch what's going on, you kind of feel the climate out there to a certain degree. But no, I know what you're saying. It's not really that concerted effort in that department, But because this is a warfare tactic, right? Ultimately, so it needs to be a strategy, organization, thought behind this.
Yes, there must, because they're doing it to us.
Yeah.
When they roll out these stories, Henrik, and they're all just BS stories, they're just absolute BS, like the lies they're telling about the Ukraine right now. Well, there's no concerted effort where we're countering that message. There's individual efforts, and they're doing a great job, but no concerted effort to just kind of like, okay, let's all agree this is like important. Talk about Svoboda. Svoboda is actually, Svoboda, of course, is the far right sector in the Ukraine. The main backer of Svoboda is Kolomoisky. Kolomoisky is the richest Jew in Israel. Okay, how can you call this, quote unquote, yes, they're Nazis, but do you think that the richest Jew in Israel is going to support somebody that's not going to ultimately back Israeli interests?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's quite a remarkable situation and very unique in Ukraine, but I've said that from day one, as soon as I realized what's going on, that they'll use anybody that they can, and work with anybody. It doesn't matter if it differs ideologically or whatnot. It's about creating chaos, of course, first of all, but legitimizing the aspect of trying to gain control. And as we've seen with the Newland situation and the rest of these, hawks down in Ukraine there, they're definitely willing to work with anybody that they can, even if they're ideologically opposed. But yeah, it's very interesting. Ukraine is bizarre,
It's been a fun story to follow, quite frankly. And it's so refreshing to see that Newland and Pyatt and the CIA and Blackwater and Shea, or whatever they want to call themselves nowadays, they got defeated. They had to call for that ceasefire because they were defeated on the battlefield. And that is one of the first defeats that this New World Order type of concept has experienced. There's a stalemate in Syria, but not a defeat. Understand? But inside Ukraine, they were soundly defeated.
What's going on there now? Have you been watching the latest in terms of the developments? It's just been one of these stories that have been going and going and going, and I've kind of lost track of it really in the last few weeks or so. Is there any risk of this, blooming out into a much more severe conflict, do you think, or is this going to settle down at this point?
Well, I think it's going to settle down, and for two reasons. One is that the Ukraine military has been smashed. The right sectors have been pretty well smashed on the battlefield. So they are in very big trouble. The economy, it's moving to winter. We're coming, now almost October. Sweden, it can be really cold. And the steppes of Russia can even be colder.
Yeah.
You've got at least the ocean around you to help keep things a little bit warm. The steppes of Russia are an absolute terrible place to be in the middle of winter. So no one wants to be fighting in the middle of winter. These guys, it's their home turf. They know what it's about. So both sides need to pull back because they understand we're approaching winter. We can't be sitting out there in minus 40-degree weather trying to fight each other. It just doesn't make sense. Two is the political situation. There's lots of infighting within Kiev, and there's lots of infighting within Novorossiya. And because of the infighting, there's no real political will to actually go out and relaunch a campaign because there's infight bickering in both sides. Both sides have their peace unit, and both sides have their war unit. And neither side on either side is strong enough to actually control the situation. So because of that, they just have to kind of freeze it while they figure out who's going to rise to power and actually control the next step. And that's what we're going to have to wait and see.
Let's zoom out a bit on that and the bigger picture here and the context with Russia, because as we know, we have a lot of the old powers, the old oligarchs, a lot of them had dual citizenship. They, go between Israel and whatever other country they find themselves in at the moment. Like Berezovsky and some of these people who, of course, interestingly was taken out, I believe, actually in London, was it last year? And, because they've been working really hard on trying to control the Ukraine. We had the Orange Revolution, all these Zionists were in there and basically tried to, get control of the situation. Is that what it's still about? That's still the main issue here?
Yes, that's exactly it. This is a Zionist push. It's all part of this, what we call the Anglo-Zionist push to control the world. I mean, these guys are at the very core of it, New World Orderists. They believe in this dominant theory that they have this God-given right to control the world. a unipolar world where only they are in charge, and they're working very hard to make it happen. And the last real place to stand in their way, what relative to European Western civilization, is the Rus or Russia. I'm not talking about the steppes of Russia. I'm talking about white Russia, the real white Russians, the ones that have always been working for Western enlightenment, equally, within their part of this of Europe. And these guys are the ones, I believe, behind the rise of Russian nationalism. And that's, of course, who the neocons want to take out.
Definitely. I mean, I think it's horrible to see Ukrainians and Russians fighting with each other, and I've heard, even talk with some Ukrainians who, were out traveling, and they were like, they're insane. They don't know what they're doing. And it feels to me that, and I read about this a while back, but how the media was controlling Ukraine to kind of, kind of heighten this sense of, see, I want people to think about this because this is how they're using it when it fits them. Of course, they were pushing a kind of delusional nationalism on the Ukrainians, and primarily the young people got kind of suckered in on this, and they believed that like Russians is the enemy. Let's go around and beat up Russians on the street. That's going to help, It's like horrible to see these two brothers of people, brothers and sisters, really so closely related. They're basically the same people getting in at it with each other, while we have a third party standing, kind of rubbing their hands together, laughing, ha ha ha, there you go, and other people are at each other's throat. And I think it's just, I was mortified when I saw that. These people should get along. They should realize that they're, related, and they should be able to work it out. But no, unfortunately not.
Yeah, I've heard that equally that the propaganda coming from the Ukraine side is absolutely overbearing and, quite frankly, effective, and just filled with lots of delusions. We should add that, again, Ukraine's media is controlled by Jewish people. So they should not expect that the people in the media care one iota about the Ukrainian people. They don't care. Again, within this idea of Jewish thought and Noahidism and this racist idea, they believe that, all of us goys are supposed to serve them. And if that means dying on behalf of some war for them, hey, it's okay. They don't have a problem with that. And I believe that is exactly what is happening at the spiritual level relative to those who are foisting this media campaign against the Ukrainian people. Interesting.
I want to ask you more about that later, by the way. Noahid's law and the kind of the religious origin to this, basically. But what do you think is next here then in this situation? I mean, if they haven't been able to topple it in the way that they have, I guess we're going to see a strengthened response ultimately by Russia as well. They're obviously trying to harden, and they're obviously trying to protect themselves from this, which of course is their right to do to a certain extent. I mean, the people in like Crimea, but other parts of Ukraine as well, are primarily Russian. And to me, it's amazing how much this situation is comparable to the Poland-Germany situation before the Second World War broke out. It's kind of the same scenario here, where one is calling the other aggressor, one is trying to protect their people. It's going back and forth. What's the big picture here in terms of escalation and whatnot?
Well, I think now, again, everything's going to stop because of winter. Winter is a very serious thing, both for the Europeans and the people in Russia and Ukraine. I think the big picture now for the next foreseeable 6-7 months is a cessation. You might see some more sanctions from sanctions just seems to be like so childish. You know what I mean? So childish. We're gonna freeze your money, which, that to me is like a punk kid who's got a ball and now he's not winning, so he's gonna take his ball and go home. The laws allowed these Russians to come and invest, and now they want to just take it. That's just theft. You know what I mean? There's no other way to describe it other than theft. We might see more of that, but I think the Russians so far have shown a pretty astute understanding of the politics, and they're playing it well. And I think we might try to see some more divisions inside of Europe, of course, to break it. NATO's going to talk, but I saw Fedorov. He's one of the Duma speakers. And he said, look, NATO's talking about a 10,000-man quick reaction force. He said, do you know what a 10,000-man reaction force really is? He says it's a big target that one missile can take out in one day, just a few minutes. He said, so We don't care about this stupid force. Then he's talking about what Russia really is. This massive country with massive human capital, lots of untapped resources, world-class theoretical physicists. It's lacking, of course, in the investment that we have in the West in research, R&D facilities, things of that nature. But nonetheless, there's still world-class scientists and mathematicians. Said, look, to us, all of these sanctions are a blessing in disguise because now we can start develop it because it's going to be cheaper now to just do it in-house than to outsource it to the West.
Interesting. Yeah.
So now Russia says when we are finished with this, Russia is going to be many times stronger than we were. And when you look at like England always threatening Russia, right?
Yep.
England always threatening. The guy, he's laughing. The guy in the Duma, he's laughing. He says, what does England have? England has a bunch of bankers sitting in London. And we have a massive country. We are the largest producer of oil, one of the largest producers of gas. We have a massive military. We have nuclear weapons. What is England going to do to us, really? What can England do to Russia, really? So we they're basically we're not intimidated. Who's Cameron? Who's the UK? This is a nobody. This is a long lost kingdom that is now wrapped up around the American flag. And yeah, the Americans still have quite a lot. We have a huge offensive military budget, but we'll see. It's fascinating, to deal with these issues.
Yeah, it is. It's definitely a proxy war here that they're fighting. Of course, getting other people involved, as it always is, but. It's not like other times when the oil and gas prices and whatnot have been, low economic warfare in terms of that. In this regard, now when prices are so high, this is obviously something that Russia is really, really benefiting from as well. And another interesting note to that as well, we posted a story about this a while back, and actually they were going to suggest that the Russian media now is to be owned primarily by Russians, right? A revolutionary idea. I think that there were a couple of lawmakers there that prepared a bill to basically order Russian mass media companies to have at least, it's not 100%, but at least 80% of their stock held by Russian investors. I guess they realize the media war to this. They realize that they're sick of, foreign oligarchs and Zionists with dual citizenships and everything else. And I hope that they manage to, get that in complete control, because that's going to be really important to them as well, I think.
Yeah, there's a huge battle going on inside of Russia right now between the Eurasian integrationists, what they're calling now Eurasian integrationists, and Atlantean or Atlantic integrationists. And the Atlantic integrationists are by and large the fifth column inside of Russia. So the nationalist front inside of Russia is very keenly aware of this problem. And they are predicting a massive purge of the intelligentsia of Russia, if not in the near-term future, in the very short, medium-term future, because they understand the problem. Also, there's one of the former leaders of Novorossiya, Strelkov. He kind of came to fame through taking over in Luhansk and Donetsk. And he's saying the same thing. So we've had two statements from two very high-ranking individuals about a coming purge of the intelligentsia inside of Russia. And the media is just one element of it. They're saying also there must be a purge of the Ministry of Finance. There must be a purge of the Ministry of, as you said, Communications. There must be there must be these purges because, as you say, and the Russians understand the fifth column there is not working for Russia. It's working on behalf of probably this Noahidist order.
Interesting. Now, Russia has obviously become a kind of a beacon of hope to a certain extent when it comes to the decadence of the West, a kind of a stable force. I've heard Putin in his many talks talking about how he sees these issues going on in the West, that it's destroyed by intention, by mass immigration, destruction of culture, and ultimately the people as well. And he's been quite outspoken about this. And so I think he sees what's going on. And to a certain extent, I think he realizes that if this continues, what is happening right now, they'll be one of the only countries in the world that actually will remain as a to a certain extent a homogenous nation. I mean, I know that there's variations there too, but nonetheless, he realized how this game is being played, and I think that that's why all the eyes of the world. It's almost like, Russia is the new Nazis, right? And everyone is turning their eye on them, and they're the big problem in the world.
Yeah. There's this woman. Her name is Yelena Mizulina, and she is a State Duma deputy, and she was one of the authors of this quote-unquote anti-gay bill that you've heard a lot about in the Russian Duma. And really, the bill is just saying, look, you cannot create propaganda that targets children, like SpongeBob. It's filled with gay rhetoric. And they're saying, look, you cannot target children as part of your gay agenda. That's what the bill really is all about. And to let you know how strong the Jewish homosexual lobby is in America, they actually put sanctions on this woman. They froze her income, or not her income, but they froze her assets in the West, and they barred her from going into any of the Western states. That's how strong this decadent gay, Jewish, homosexual lobby really is, that they can actually freeze the assets of a woman just exercising her constitutional rights in her country of where she's born. This is so extrajudicial. It hints of this global law that Jewish people like to think they have the ability to impose on anyone anywhere on the planet.
How are they using this? I mean, something that you'd think be something, a personal preference for what people do in their own bedroom, kind of, it's one of those, so what kind of situations. But in your view, how are they using this on a political and kind of an ideological battlefront in the culture wars, Dennis?
Well, I think what you see is they're just trying to break down the family unit. Plain and simple. You're targeting kids that are very, and you guys have been covering this a lot, Henrik, especially Lana over at, I think, Radio 314, transgenderism and turning the boys into girls and the boys growing breasts and things like that. You guys are actually covering this a lot more than I have, so you guys are probably better informed about this than I am. But to me, it's just all about breaking down the dignity of the human race, and it's just turning humanity into this decadent, almost animal stature.
Wow. Yeah, it's really, really disturbing what's going on. I don't know why people can't. Some people can't really see through that. Again, how it's being used for political means and how they're trying to kind of, it's a war on human nature, ultimately. We've spoken quite a bit about that on the show as well, but it's really about reforming something. It's like, what is wrong with humanity? Is something wrong with humanity? This is how, the earth has created us, or however you view that, a creator, God, evolution, whatever. We're here now. This is what exists. What is the problem with that? It's all fine. It's been working for such a long time, and now it's like they're trying to deconstruct every aspect of it. And I believe it's for control purposes, ultimately, to take over. With the infertility issue and the chemical issue, those things combined, to take over. Reproduction, basically, get control of the population, but also even doing it in such a manner that they can get everyone under kind of a legislation umbrella, that if you no longer have parents in part of this role, but it will be some kind of technological achievement that will ensure the perpetuation of the human species, then we're talking about something completely different. I'm really scared when I'm, thinking about what's going on here on the infertility issue,
Yeah, that's pretty diabolical when you look about creating a technological system where you're procreating via technology and eliminating parents. Now you're creating a precedent that right out of science fiction, I guess, but it can't bode well for the human family.
Nope, it's absolutely not. It's really scary. Now, let's talk a bit more, see if you have anything more to talk about in terms of Putin and the strategies, because I know that there's been certain kind of conflicting information as well. I don't know how detailed you are about this, and I've just heard it kind of in passing, really. I haven't had time to really look into the source material for this, but it seems to be that he was doing some kind of work in terms of he's talking favorably, allegedly, about multiculturalism in some aspects. He'd been trying to kind of I guess, appeal more and more to the Jewish community within Russia as well. Do you think that he's just kind of playing political, ball here? He's trying to figure out what to do in terms of saying something that will temporarily appease people, or is he? I mean, people have speculated about that it's really still Zionism is really strong in Russia. It's still being controlled. It's being used as this another kind of setup in the dialectic political process. What's really going on beneath the surface there? Do you think, Dennis?
I believe politics plays a huge role. The Qaballah is a huge organizational force across the planet, something like 3,300 institutions across the planet. Very powerful. It has some of the most wealthy individuals on this planet are part of this movement. So it's not something you can easily go after, I guess, or what's the word? See, I lose my language over here, Henrik, being in the Middle East. I really do. I lose my vocabulary. I know what I want to say, but I forgot what I wanted to say. That's terrible.
Yeah, it
happens.
happens.
You can't minimize them. That's the word. You can't just minimize the Kabad movement. It's huge. And playing politics, Putin, let's be honest, you've been in power for what, 12 years? You have to be a shrewd politician.
Yeah,
you have to be. You can't run another aircraft carrier like the Soviet or Russia, I should say, and not be a shrewd politician. So I would say that for now, based on everything I've seen, I just have to say he's just playing shrewd politics.
Yeah,
he just went after Evtushchenko or something like that. This guy was another Jewish guy. An oligarch, you could call him. But imagine, a Jewish guy just happens to control all of the fixed lines of Russia after the fall of the Soviet Union. Go figure. Yeah, no conspiracy here, right?
Yeah.
Well, that guy was just arrested last week.
Interesting.
So they're, again, Putin is not, I believe the nationalist front inside Russia is a huge movement to be reckoned with. Russian, let's be honest, Putin's riding about 88% popularity right now. It's not like you can say, hey, the people aren't backing him. Yeah, they back him. 88% say we love Putin. He's doing a great job for us. Probably you see headlines, Putin's finished. How do you tell someone who's at 88% that he's finished?
Right.
The disconnect between Jewish media and reality, sometimes it boggles my mind to the point where it's just insanely absurd. And that's almost crazy to say. But yeah, it's what do you mean he's finished? He's at 88%, guys.
Well, there's been several assassination attempts on him as well. I mean, it's amazing he's still around, really. But do you think that the nationalism in Russia has any capability of teaming up with other nationalist movements in Europe, like in France or wherever we see a rise of this? I mean, some of them, of course, have responded. I think even the Swedish nationalists, Swedish Democrats, have. They wanted to gear up the military again. It's been deconstructed for over many years here, but they wanted to gear up again because they were fearing Russia. So they're kind of falling right into that trap to a certain degree. But hopefully there could be some kind of recognition of unity here in terms of the bigger problem that we have, the elephant in the room.
I don't understand why people at a micro level, are falling for it. Look, the Russians and the Chinese, I swear, they're just out there making money hand over foot right now. They're making money hand over foot. Even with all the sanctions, Russia's economy grew at 5%. Okay, come on. Yeah, it's hurting, but it's still growing. They're what do you call this? Their unemployment is the lowest it's ever been. So, yeah, sanctions are hurting, and it's going to cause some problems with growth. But Russia's not interested in wasting their money on. Come on, they're not going to go fight a war in Poland or Austria or Czech Republic. They don't have time for this. They are here to make money and to make things better for their people, which is exactly what our politicians should be doing for us.
Yep, I agree. Yeah, we haven't had a good leadership in so many years. I mean, even a benevolent dictator, someone who actually has the interests of the people at heart. Would be, ideal in a situation like this where there needs to be some kind of structure or an order put back into place, because it's just so much of this kind of really corrosive, movements all over the West, basically, that are just kind of eating away at the heart of this thing. And I think without someone who has the interests of the people at heart, and yes, peaceful nationalism, whatever, in any regard, that can work in cooperation peacefully with other interests to realize that this is going on as well, I think would be ideal in this scenario. But it seems at this stage, in a way, there's no hope in sight for that, and we haven't had that in such a long time that I think there's kind of a suspicion overall about any kind of leadership, really, which I guess is healthy at the root of it, but at some degree, it has turned people off so much to it too that we can't even envision how a well-oiled, well-run system would look like.
Yeah, I think ZeroHedge.com, they came out with an article, I think this week or maybe yesterday. Since 2000, the trend has been steady to where now only 23% of Americans believe that the country is actually headed in a good direction. That's what, 71% didn't know. So 23 plus 1 is 24. That means 76% of Americans now believe that the country is headed in the wrong direction and things are not right inside of America. That's huge, and that's a trend that started since 2000. So since 2000, it's actually been a steady trend down. And I can't see that happen. And it's, as you're kind of hinting at, the system itself is failing. When you can pull off a 9/11 and hold nobody responsible, when you can crash the banking system, throw millions of people out of their houses. And I know you weren't in America, you're in Sweden, but millions of people lost their homes. The banking situation has caused problems throughout the world, and not one person is held responsible. This tells the people that there's something terribly wrong with the system, and the system must change. And these people they're not empowered to change it right now, because even the elections, they're rigged. You can't you can't vote really because of rigged elections. The system is such that the press works along with the government and the military, and heck, you've seen the stories now about the militarization of the American police. Heck, the American people are virtually facing a paramilitary army now if they were to try to protest. So it's a very dangerous time now for America and Americans, because honestly, and I'm not an Alex Jones type of guy, but hey, all the mechanisms are in place to just start disappearing people on a major level, and no one would even notice. It's a country of 330 million. You could lose 100,000 people and nobody would notice in that country.
Yeah. Now, it's this is, of course, a time of kind of great opportunity as things begin to fall apart too. But it's also a great time of risk, and power consolidation. Consolidation of assets and private property in America, as more of these kind of oligarch forces are also pushing for, more kind of centralized control, as banks kind of fall out of the picture, it ends up in fewer and fewer hands. And there's also risk, where a lot of well-intended good movements, like the Occupy crowd and all this kind of stuff is like kind of potentially might be running things in the wrong direction. And although they might be, well-intended and whatnot, you still have a threat of that kind of globalist internationalism, which is more, in my view, socialist inclined, which is heading in that direction as well. And I think that America would suffer greatly with their population and everything else if it went even further in this direction with even more public spending and everything else. I mean, it's already out of control with the military and all that. How do you view that political dynamic there? What do you think would be ideal for, in the case of America, for future direction? Do you believe in like free market and that kind of stuff, or where do you think they need to go?
Well, yeah, of course I believe in free market. I think that all of us need to be able to work at our own way without the government getting in our way. We know what's best for us at the end of the day. Do we, the people, want regulations on certain things like pollution and other things to make our environment better? Of course. I remember the 70s living where, every day, like 280 days a year, was so much smog you could barely breathe. Down in the LA area. So, yeah, I still believe there's an effective role for government, but it needs to be downsized. We need to move as rapidly as possible to a peace economy. Peace economies generate wealth for the people at 7 to 10 times that of a war economy. And we've been in a war economy, at least the United States has, for something like almost 20 years now. 14, 15 years, because they started the military buildup 1998, 1999 to prepare for the wars that they knew they were going to launch in 2001, 2002. So free market, yes. Government has a role, of course. Rounding up all the ill-gotten wealth would be great, quite frankly. People don't know. You hear about the evil Nazis. People don't even know that as late as 1942, Jews owned, that's right, Jews owned upwards of over 60% of the real estate inside of Germany. And that was 1942, at the height of the war.
Wow.
That just tells you how much, basically, when Weimar came, the Jewish elites used this as an excuse to just basically make Germans serf on their own lands.
Yeah.
And that's what they're doing in America. This same type of element is making Americans serfs on their own land. Now, it's more difficult to do, let's say, in France, but I think Sweden, it's a challenge now. Not to the degree America. I mean, come on, America, you got 48 million people surviving on food stamps because there's no jobs. Yeah. They need a peace economy. Right now they're talking about building a railroad from China to Turkey. High-speed railroad, a land bridge. Why? Well, if I'm China and I know that the U.S. has a naval superiority over me that I'm not going to be able to get around anytime soon, well, I'll just kind of like build this land bridge and I don't need to worry about America's Navy anymore. Really, strategically, I don't need. Now I can do my business with Europe and Central Asia. And I don't need even Africa. And I won't even need, because Africa can just shoot it up to Turkey, and from Turkey load it onto high-speed trains and move it.
Yeah.
And then they get rid of it. See, America should be investing in this type of technology. We've got world-class still innovation in America.
Sure, yeah.
The problem is we can't get it out of the R&D and into the people's hands. See, America still creates a ton of jobs. The problem is it's outsourced to China.
Yeah, and India and everything else, yeah.
Yes, but think of all those people working at Foxconn, building all these motherboards, et cetera. Well, those are jobs created by America.
Yeah.
So there needs to be some de-offshoring. And the Russians are speaking about this equally. He said, thankfully, all the sanctions are forcing some of the people out there to do the de-offshoring before we actually force them to de-offshore. There needs to be some de-offshoring to force people to not hide their money offshore. Now, they put the FATCA. You've heard about this FATCA, foreign something tax, whatever. It's called FATCA. I don't know what it stands for, but foreign something tax collaboration office or something like that. But basically, as an American citizen, for me to open up a bank account anywhere in the world, I have to declare all my income to the government back in America. And that bank has the right to actually withhold my income.
Jeez.
But that's how the Americans are trying to do it now. But of course, they're going after us little guys. What are you going to get out of me? $100? $500? Not a whole lot. I don't make a lot of money, guys. I live well, I survive, but I'm not making a lot of money. But they don't want to go after the big companies like Cargill and all these other major organizations that are making many tens of billions of dollars and paying nothing in taxes. They won't touch those.
No, of course not. Well, that's the interplay there. As we know, that's how they're, the guise of the free market is using the government to get their way. So it's this perfect marriage there of the elite and how they can use one to benefit and then they can use the other to benefit. And it's the worst of both scenarios, really.
This is a huge problem. All these various major corporations using the government to basically feed themselves. And what's funny is they have to, because the system is such that the market is not there, quite frankly, to pay some guy $110,000 to basically do nothing.
Yeah.
And if we don't create enough jobs at $110,000 a year, what's going to happen to your housing market? It's going to crash. What happens when your housing market crashes? Your local government's going to crash because they're taking all their money on property taxes.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you're going to have all your corporate losses and you're going to have your capital gains losses and on and on and on. It will be this huge imploding bubble. This balloon is just going to start letting all the air out. And they just can't let that happen because now everyone will see the total mismanagement of the economy by those in power.
Yeah, it's definitely House of Cards that we're looking at here. But Yeah, we're going to take a break here in a little bit, Dennis, and then, of course, continue and talk more. I wanted to get in a little bit more detail on Noachide law. You wanted to talk more about some of the Qaballah issues that is occurring, and a lot of stuff, a lot of material you have to discuss there. But let's just talk about where people can go to follow you on a more regular basis, Dennis. You have a great show down there in Jordan. You have a lot of material, of course, on your website and whatnot. I know you're working on a lot of new stuff as well. But give us some of the website addresses and everything else where people can follow you, Dennis.
Yeah, I have a radio show every Saturday morning. It broadcasts at 10 o'clock a.m. Eastern. That would be like GMT -4 or UTC -4, I think it is, or 5. I don't know where. It's either 4 or 5. Check your local listing. But it's called Inside the Eye Live, and it's known as intelligent media for the politically aware. We deal with current events, news, mainly Middle East and the Ukraine, kind of like Zionism, anti-Zionism. We talk about the Jewish equation out there. We are reaching, by the way, Henrik, about 22,000 people live now. On the stream. So that's great. We're very happy with how that's going. And you can join me over at InsideTheEyeLive.com for that. And then, of course, if you'd like to really know how English works as an esoteric or secret construction, there is the Illuminatus Observer. And Henrik, of course, you've got an old archive. Guys, you can go back and listen to that archive. It's a great interview back January 2nd, 2011. We don't need to redo it. You can just go back and hear that interview.
Yep.
It was a great interview, Henrik. It's still probably your best one in the space, man. It was good, But, it was. What can we say? It was a great interview and it was well received. And you guys can go listen to it. Again, just go to Red Ice Radio and go to the archives, 2011. January 2nd, and you can just hear that interview about the esoteric secret of English, and those are the two places where I think you can reach me right now.
All right, great. Thank you so much, Dennis. InsideTheEyeLive.com and also IlluminatusObserver.blogspot.com. We'll have both of these links up on the website, so check it out there. All right, Dennis, stay with us. We'll take a short break here. We'll be right back. A lot more to discuss. We'll pick up here soon. In the next hour, we change topic and discuss what is known as Noachide law. Dennis will put this in the proper context, first from the point of view of his work on the Hermetic Qaballah, which has been encoded into the English language. He explains how we've had a rich Kabbalistic tradition in the West that was meddled into the Jewish Qaballah. He tells us about the Osirian and Essenian mystery schools and describe how the two movements in play are found in the Torah. Later, then, we'll hear more about Noachide law, which the American Congress actually passed into law on Education Day many years ago. Well, wait until you hear about the background on this as Dennis elaborates further on how big the Noachide movement really is. Most people have no idea. Later, we discuss the power of vocalizing the truth and creating Kabbalistic spells to reverse their spells. A very interesting second hour is coming up, so don't miss it. Please sign up and tune in at redicemembers.com. You can stream or download with your computer. We also have instructions for how to listen in iTunes or your portable device and phone. Also, and I'll keep mentioning this for you guys and gals that are on iPhone or iPad, the new release of iOS 8 are giving us a few issues on the members' website at the moment. We are working on solving this right now, but a quick and easy way to circumvent this is to use a podcast app so that you can download and listen on your iPhone or iPad. We have easy and very helpful instructions in the FAQ on redicemembers.com. Just click on iPhone or iPad from there and you have the full instructions right there. We appreciate your patience on this until we've fixed the problem. We have more coming in just a few days, but we'll pick this up right after the break with Dennis Fetcho. Stay tuned for much more. Thank you for listening. And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us here for the second hour together with Dennis Fetcho from Inside the Eye Live and Illuminatus Observer. We're having a very interesting discussion, of course, about the current times, about the situation in Russia, about the problems we're facing both in the West but also in the Middle East and all around the world, really, as this is global issues and global problems that we're talking about. And we're going to go a little bit deeper into some of the things that we kind of brushed upon briefly in the first hour here, and it has to do with Noachide law and some of these other things. I mean, I guess this kind of springboards off of the work that you've done on the the Hermetic Kabbalah. You've talked about these kinds of issues for really a long time, Dennis. But tell us about this aspect to it and how you got onto this track, and explain to us what Noachidist law actually is.
Okay, let's kind of like step way back before we get to there, because there's let's just lay some of the groundwork for people not familiar. When you look at Western esoteric traditions, what we really have is this system rooted in these Osirian/Isis, or Isian they call it. I call it Isisian mystery schools. And then you have the schools dedicated to Seth, which is the Jewish God. So you've got, you've had these two movements in play. Now, you've heard about them if you read your Torah. And a lot of us in the West, we're born up or raised in these Christian families, especially people my age. We're raised in these Christian families, and we know about this war by just reading the Torah. If you look at like Isaiah 56 or something like that, or 65, it talks about, those of you who bowed your head down to the God of good fortune, and I'm going to chop all your heads off type of thing. That's part of this big war going on out there, where you've got these two elites fighting each other over time. Now, my theory, and Henrik, you cover so much on Red Ice Radio. People know that things are not as they appear. Our history is adulterated. Everything about our history is basically false for the most part. It's all fabricated. So we know we can't trust what's going on. So then we have to really pull things apart and try to understand the Western esoteric traditions and those on the Sessian side. This gets at the higher levels known as Qaballah. Qaballah is like the elite schools out there. So you had, of course, Qaballah, which is supposed to have come out around, let's say, 1000 AD. But really, Qaballah existed all the way back into the Pythagorean times. This is where we saw the emphasis put on letters and numbers and sounds, and we read about the creation of words even further back in Democritus. So we've had a rich Kabbalistic tradition in the West, completely divorced from the Jewish traditions of the rabbis. The problem is that over the last 200, 300 years, this knowledge has been disappearing. You had groups like the OTO that would come up, and they tried to meld this English Hermetic Kabbalah into this Jewish Kabbalah. And so there's lots of confusion in today's generation as to really what was transpiring. But at the end of the day, the Kabbalahs, elements of the Kabbalahs are actually encoded into the languages. This means English has its own Kabbalistic sets and rules. It's pretty much dead now, but you had the Greek had its own sets and rules. The Jewish or the Hebrew has its own sets and rules. The runes, as you know, had its own sets and rules. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure through all the various other languages, they had their elite at one time who had their own quote-unquote sets and rules. I'm not an expert on those. I'm an expert on English.
So just to clarify, in this regard, the Kabbalah doesn't necessarily mean it's of Hebrew origin. This has been existence in many, many ancient cultures, correct?
That is correct. Even the Tree of Life we find in the Sumerian. Some of the tales we find spread out all over the world. I know for a fact, because I used to teach some people associated with a high-level martial arts group out of Indonesia. This group was actually the heads of this group were the bodyguards to the king of Saudi Arabia, and their martial arts was designed, the defensive moves and steps, it was actually designed around a code that I had put together. I didn't put it together, I deconstructed, that I call the Philosopher's Stone. And the actual martial arts stepping patterns that they are taught are the exact same stepping patterns of the Isisian, or this, the Hermetic Stone, mm-hmm. or the Philosopher's Stone. So we know it's spread out all over the world. When we look at creation stories around the world, because there's lots of, as you know, there's creation stories everywhere. One of the creation stories that's very typical is this idea of this stone coming down from heaven. In Indonesia, for instance, they talk about the stone and the banana, and the creator, he says, hey, I'm going to give you a stone, and then the people say, hey, what am I going to do with the stone? I don't want the stone. Instead, they took the banana. and then they ate the banana, and then they're going to have children, and then they're going to die. Well, this is what we call part of what we call an achromatic cipher. And what an achromatic cipher is that these are ways the elite encode their system into various myths or mythologies. So in the case of the stone and the banana, this is just the Indonesian transposition of the Adam and Eve story. So the Adam and Eve story, she eats the apple, and then the Jehovah God, he casts them out, and he has the Garden of Eden is guarded by the flaming sword and the cherub.
Right.
Now, the key point about our Western systems is that it is melded onto. It's melded. It's fused to the Torah. So by understanding the Torah, we can actually gain the insights to our Kabbalah, the English Kabbalah. And this is where people get confused. Well, English hasn't been around that long. I don't care. If you want to believe in this massive omniscient deity, all things were created at the same time. So therefore, they will just manifest in various elements of time, but they're all created at the very same point, an instance in time. That's one of the basics of Kabbalah. So therefore, my English Kabbalah is created at the exact same time as your Jewish Kabbalah. It's when it manifests at a point in time. But they were created at the same time. All things are created at the same time. That's the Kabbalistic idea.
Can't you view that in reverse as well, saying that the English language, when it was constructed, was actually constructed with this in mind?
And that's that is exactly my thesis here, is that our English language here, guys, was actually constructed with all of these rules in mind, in order to reveal these various truths in the language. So we start again with this philosopher's stone. Now, looking back, what we have to do is, if you go back to Plutarch is big. You need to know about Plutarch if you're going to really break down the way the Western esoteric traditions are working. There's two different translations. I always recommend you go and you read 2 or 3 translations to find what feels right. So, for instance, one translation out there about this, it says here, I'll just quote it real fast. For Isis is a Greek word, and so is Typhon her enemy. For he is puffed up by want of knowledge and falsehood, and tears to pieces and puts out of sight the sacred word. Okay, that's one translation. Another translation reads, for Isis is a Greek word, and so also is Typhon her enemy, who is conceited, as his name implies, because of his ignorance and self-deception. He tears to pieces and scatters to the winds the sacred writings. Well, those are two completely different translations from the exact same point in the text. One talks about the sacred word, just puts out of sight the sacred word. The other talks about tearing to pieces and scattering to the winds the sacred writings, which those of us, like myself, dedicated to the Isisian mystery schools, we work to pull all these writings together, deconstruct them, and then put them back into their original context. One of the very basic elements of this is this idea of a lost or hidden word. We've all heard about the lost word, the omnific word. Yeah. I'm sure you have.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
We've all heard about this in our Western traditions. Well, the person, the God who's supposed to give that word to Isis is called Hermes, however they want to say it, also known as Mercury. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, as you know from the astrotheologians out there, like Santilli and others, they kind of like play in that space, right?
Right.
Mercury is Mercury, the planet. Okay, no problem. We're aware of that. He goes really fast through the heavens, really, really fast. Okay, therefore he becomes the messenger of the gods because he's going so fast. He's going from point to point to point really fast. He still exists to this day in such things as mercantilism. His name is very famous, in other words. Mercantilism is just one. A merchant. This is invoking the god Mercury. Miercules is invoking the god Mercury. So that name is very, very key. It's a very rich foundation name. And that's, I guess, a different story, but it's there. Now, Mercury, of course, is moving very, very fast. Now, what most people don't know is how many times it moves around the planet, right? Or around the sun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The time for Mercury is highly exact. Let's see here. It says, I actually wrote about this years ago. But there is a cycle it takes where it goes through a major conjunction. That conjunction takes exactly 116 days. Actually, it's 115.9 days. Well, when you divide 365 by 116, Mercury completes the cycle every 3.14. There's 3.14 cycles per Earth year.
Interesting.
There's the pi thing that I keep teaching all over the place. Also, the ancients never looked at Mercury in a single year. They looked at it over a 7-year cycle. And the reason why they did that is because it takes Mercury 22 conjunctions over 7 years to return back to its original point on planet Earth, as it's relatively viewed from Earth. Well, again, 22 over 7 is 3.1428571, or a reciprocal 7 of pi. And I'm very specific about 3.1428571 because there are people out there teaching, if you call it that, this pi concept, but they don't even have a clue as to why you're carrying things out to 7 digits. You must know about 1428571 because this astronomic or this number will appear like in certain megaliths in the Mayan system. So we want to make sure that you're armed with the knowledge so that you can start to deconstruct on your own. So for those who are interested, you can enter these mysteries and start to deconstruct. So we've got 2 different ways in which Mercury is encoding pi, because remember, Mercury gives the word to us, this sacred word. Well, guess what? That word so far is 3.14 years and 22 over 7, which is reciprocal 7 pi. Now when we look at the Kabbalistic construction of the words, okay? Kabbalistic constructions. There are 3 particular words that we need to know about the Greek system here, about relative to Hermes or Mercury. If we take again 22 over 7, okay, and we invert it, in other words, we take the fraction of 722, or pi now to -1, this number becomes 0.318. Why is 0.318 important? Is because it's used correlationally, which means the decimal floats. 318 was encoded as the word Helios using the Greek gematria. This Helios always reveals like a circle, 1, 1000. Where's my great key? I got the great key here. Really, I have it. Where's those words? Let me do a control F here.
Mm-hmm.
Magos, because Magos is key here. Okay, Magos, which is the wise man or the magician, it adds up to 314. Megas, which is Megas, equals great. Kleis, Kleis, again, in the Greek gematria, equals key. Now, the wise man or the magician is Mercury. So the Mercury is the great key, or Magos, Megas, Kleis, is 3.14159265, which is again what? Pi.
Right.
So now we've established a key point to the Illuminati system, which is a return of the great word, the omnific word. Now this is important because you've got one sect over there called the rabbins. The rabbis, they're teaching this Noachide law based on their Qaballah. Yet we have within our esoteric traditions the absolute deconstruction of the ancient omnific word, and we can show it in many dozens of ways. And actually probably in hundreds if we worked hard at it. For instance, if you take my name, Fetch, I Fetch, speak the words of the gods, and you put that into a gematria calculator, you know how much that equals? 314. Again, esoteric significance here. Because, you know, Henrik Fetch was not my original name.
Right.
Fetch is not I was adopted. I was given that name. Really, I was given that name.
Yeah.
You have to ask, was this monarch? Was this CIA? Was this something? Was I programmed as a child and they knew what they were doing and they said, okay, this is how it works. We're going to put this person with this family and he's going to have the nickname of Fetch ever since. Right? We don't know how these people work. It's just, this is the mystical, esoteric qualities of the language.
Mm-hmm.
Now, part of what we have to do is we must deconstruct everything. Well, we already can deconstruct like the Philosopher's Stone. There's something about Hermes. And Hermes is up there, and this is an article called Hermes, the Wisdom of the Egyptians. It came out like around 1928 by a guy by the name of Brian Brown. And it's about Hermes talking to Osiris. And he's supposed to be up there, and he's up there, and he talks to Osiris, and he says, hey, what did I just see? Hermes says, hey, I can now see clear. And Osiris says, well, it's because the word now is in thee. That would be pi. Now you, of course, have the word within yourself. You have everything. And then he gets dizzy and he starts to fall down. It says here, Hermes became heavier than a stone and fell through space like a meteorite. And then he talks about how his limbs seemed as heavy as iron. Well, that's the same type of text used in the hymn to Odin, where he talks about how dizzying he fell. And he grabbed the runes and he grew in wisdom and knowledge. Again, what we're talking about here is shamanistic experiences. Right. This hermetic side where we're pulling the information from the ether, from this shamanistic style journey where we're able to take the knowledge, not from this plane, but from a different plane, and then transmute it into words so people can begin to understand it.
Yep.
Now, when we look back at the ancient traditions, what is it about the Jewish tradition that always struck me was that they had an absolute hatred for anything about the quote-unquote the spoken word. They were at war. I don't know about where you grew up, Henrik, but where I grew up, the spoken word traditions like the tarot, palm reading, this information is kind of like passed through families, etc., because it was dangerous to write down. This was vilified to such a degree that it was dangerous, even in my generation.
Yeah.
You couldn't talk about it in the 70s. It was dangerous.
Yeah.
You could have your careers derailed if you were a teacher, just trying to talk about it. So there was always this hatred for the spoken word traditions. Then we have to, of course, start to deconstruct the various ancient texts. Well, we got the Epic of Gilgamesh. The Epic of Gilgamesh gives us an exceedingly rich story about the floods, the great flood, Noah's flood.
Yeah.
And they're talking about, hey, there's this gathering of the gods after the flood comes around, and they're saying, hey, you, Enlil, how dare you do such a thing? Cursed are you, Enlil. Well, Enlil is the Jewish god. So now in the Epic of Gilgamesh, we got lots of gods chastising the Jewish god. Now, from a rational point of view, why are we going to give credence to just the Jewish God?
Right. Yeah.
Why? Because this whole Noachide system is predicated on the idea that there was a great flood. And since only Noah could survive, this is Jewish thinking now. You talk about a bunch of children, believing in fairy tales and acting on it, go no further than the Jewish culture people. Because they believe that, hey, well, because Noah survived the flood, well, all of these commandments had to be given to Noah. Hence, they become called the Noachide law.
Yeah.
Wow. So now we're dealing really, when you think about it, with a childish people steeped in mythology. Remember, you were probably growing up, and if you believed in superstitions and mythologies, they probably thought you were probably childish, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Grow up. Quit believing in all these childish mythologies. But you have a whole race of people, some of the wealthiest, most powerful people on this planet, and they believe in these fairy tales, and they just refuse to grow up. And they're dangerous. That's the problem. They're dangerous because this system is exceedingly racist. There's like 66 laws for Noachides, and there's like 613 for Jews. The Noachides are like what we call rectified goys. The rest of us are cattle because we're not Noachides yet.
Right.
We haven't converted to the point, oh, Mr. Jew, please let me serve you. How may I serve you? Why is this important on a political sense? Because when you hear like Ted Cruz, you heard about Ted Cruz getting booed off stage?
Yeah.
You heard about that. Why? Because he is absolutely 100% in service to the Jewish people. That is your Noachide. Relative to the Noahide law system, this global planetary thing that is looking to put Noahide laws into place. You've got your secret hidden Jews. You've got even the dumbest Jewish guy sitting there getting high on heroin in some place in India who's bailed out of life relative to the Noahide system. That person is infinitely more important than any of us listening today, unless you're Jewish. And we have an obligation relative to the way that the Jewish people think, and this is a global Jewish movement, folks. We have an obligation to serve that Jew however he demands.
So this is a religious, ideological conviction in terms of the status of the people who are, in this regard, elected to this or have this position, I guess, by birth, really, right? That's what this is about. Or can anybody enter into this by accepting the belief system, or how does that work?
Jewish. You have to be Jewish to be part of the elite, and then you can only become a good Noachide, which means that you're going to serve Jews. This would be like the Ted Cruzes, the John Kerrys. When you look at the political system, all of these various quote-unquote white sellouts, you can call them white sellouts, right? They are what you call the Noachide. So they've kind of like entered into the system, but they're still below the Jews.
So this would be like the Zionim of the Zionists, basically.
No, the Zionim are actually Jewish people, just traitors. They're spying on behalf of the Israeli state. Okay. Zionim are actual Jewish spies, but they're working not as an official spy. So let's say I'm a banker and I'm Jewish, and I come in as a non-Jewish guy, and I deposit $100,000, and I want to buy this piece of property. And I have a good idea why I need to buy it. And the Zionim will say, oh, there must be something up here. He calls his Tel Aviv handlers, his Jewish, and says, hey, such and such a non-Jew just put a $100,000 bet on this property. Well, let's see if it's worth anything. And maybe you're outbid by $5,000 because the Zionim is working against you.
I see. Yeah.
Or maybe you go to the doctor, and the Jewish doctor sign him, and he determines you determine together that this is what's ailing you. Hey, this is what's ailing this guy. Okay, well, if you use these type of non-invasive or non-lethal technologies like a microwave or some type of ultrasonic type of waveform on him, you're going to aggravate this case. Maybe the tumor's going to start to grow further and faster. This is how Zionism will work on a practical level. Now, as they're working for ways to find ways to essentially advance what is good for Jews. And this is a global phenomenon. I mean, Jews are taught to think local but act global. Why else would you have the ADL talking about what's going on inside of Greece or Hungary?
Right, yeah.
Like, what's it your business, dude? Just shut the F up. Right? It's not your business. Just go raise your 200 million, but what are you talking about Polish or Hungarian or Czech or whatever politics for?
Right.
Why do you care about the Golden Dawn? Because, again, it's a global movement. It's a global conspiracy, essentially. Now, there are all kinds of rules out there, and again, we don't want to talk about so much of the rules because, it's basically a bunch of delusional people spending their life in their delusion, but they want to project it onto people. One of the basic tenets of Noahide law is that all Jews must work hand in hand to create this Noahide system, which is nothing but a Jewish top-down control system for planet Earth. That means they must establish laws that we must abide by. They can impose them on us. We don't have a choice. That's the way they think. It doesn't matter what we think. It's not about democracy. This is called Noahide law. This is Jews control the planet, guys.
Noahide law. Now, does this borrow also then from the Torah and the Talmud and other these texts, or
sent from the Talmud?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's basically 100% from the Talmud. And so basically, what is the Talmud but a bunch of rabbis getting together to think they're important over the past, couple millennia? I mean, some of the stuff you're in the Talmud is like, you guys are insane. You're insane, I mean, they're spending 20 pages on what type of sexual relations you can have. You cannot have sex with the mother of your daughter. Or, the mother of your father, whatever. They're out there. You know what I mean? But what, you guys got to come up and spend 20 pages talking about this? Are you guys that stupid? But they're that delusional. This is the problem. And they're very, very powerful people. And that's the big problem. They are exceedingly powerful. Let me give you a breakdown of just how big this movement is on a planetary scale from an organizational structure, okay? From organization. As of 2007, there were 3,300 Chabad institutions around the world. As of 2006, there were Chabad centers in 75 countries. Others are listing something like an additional 1,350 Chabad institutions. That would include like schools, Chabad affiliated establishments, etc. In total, according to its directory, Chabad maintains a presence in 950 cities, 178 of those in Europe, 14 in Africa, 200 in Israel, 400 in North America, and 38 in South America, and another 70, excluding Israel, but including Russia in Asia. Can you imagine? That is the organizational structure. Now, from a political point of view, it's estimated that Chabad reaches about 8 million Jews worldwide. It's exceedingly powerful. I remember in L.A. every year you had the Chabad telethon. Posters everywhere. Everywhere. Now, from a political point of view, what's happening is that the elite on a voting structure, they're tapping into this as a democratic element because it's very difficult to reach 2,000, 3,000 people, or million, I should say, in one shot. And within that, there's a huge amount of billionaires within the system. So there's a huge incentive to tap into Chabad because A, you've got the financing, you've got the billionaires who can finance everything. B, you've got the numbers. You can reach a lot of people with just one phone call, essentially. Get the rabbi to say, hey, this is who you vote. Now, all of a sudden, you've got what? 400 here, 700 there. All of a sudden, you got 30, 40, 100,000 votes.
Yeah, interesting.
This is the same technique that was being used in Turkey by Erdogan. Erdogan tapped into what was called the Gulen movement.
Yeah,
which
that's right.
is kind of like the Chabad of Islam.
Oh. So, just to clarify that point as well, in the West, of course, we've been encouraged in terms of the separation of church and state that politics shouldn't go together with religious ideology and whatnot. But this is not the case here, both when it comes to Islam, but also what we're talking about here with the Noachides and all these movements. This is something which is based in a religious concept, but it's overlapping into politics they're using politics in order to fulfill the religious objectives and goals, correct?
That is correct. They are using politics to fulfill their religious goals. And in many things, these religious goals really have nothing to do with religion. It is basically trying to put a religious spell on a totalitarian system.
Yeah.
You got to let people feel good about what they're doing. They got to feel motivated. Oh, this is a higher calling. They have to work hard. So what do? You put a religious spin on it.
So what's their view of other people and cultures and religions and whatnot? I remember hearing a while back, we linked up a video by a guy talking about, the view in terms of what Israel has and what they have, and even in terms of the military arsenal and how this is viewed, I guess, from the rabbinical community, and in terms of how they see that this, God have given them, the land now, they have, weaponry and everything else. And he was talking about how this was basically a, fulfillment of certain of these things that were to be kind of granted to them. But from this point, they would, kind of take following steps and procedures due to this. And he explained I might not put too much validity in him, but he had a very interesting talk. I forget his name now. I can link it up. But he mentioned how, especially the view of Christians. I mean, let's not even talk about so-called pagans, right? But the Christians was a huge issue and problem, and there was this kind of vengeance in the works towards Christianity behind some of these movements as well. What have you heard about this?
Yeah, absolutely right. These people hate Christians. They see Christians as one of the most vile people on planet Earth, to say the least. And you can see this throughout all of their, much of their writing, quite frankly. They believe that Christians are idolaters. They don't worship their God, so consequently, they're subject to being liquidated. And the interesting thing about Noachidism is that when they kill you, which is some of the stuff is just stupid. You have to read it to understand how barbaric and archaic and backwards these people really are. The way that they want to kill you is through beheading. So you see all of this beheading going on. It's like, you know what? This is like Noachidism, guys. This is all straight out of Jewish Noachidism, because that's what Noachidism calls for. If you just don't like what they're doing, you kill them by cutting their heads off. That's called Noachidism. And that's called for directly out of their Talmud. I mean, get this. I mean, imagine if you changed the words from Jew to non-Jew, right? Get this. This is a general tenet. The Tikkun. And by the way, guys, my work has been taken into, I know, the Noahidist systems. I've got people in Hollywood that have been blacklisted because they studied under me. Because our Qaballas are in opposition. We're diametrically opposed to each other. Our Hermetic systems are all about creating life, creating growth, creating wealth, creating things better for the community. This is all about destroying the wealth for everybody but the Jewish people. Now get this. Just imagine if you and I put this out as a religious system, okay? A non-Jew cannot be a righteous Gentile if in his heart he feels no affinity for God's people. Now imagine if we put this: a Jew cannot be a righteous Jew if in his heart he feels no affinity for us non-Jews.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How would we be viewed if we put that out?
That's what I always like to do. I like to remind people about that, to discover these double standards. Just reverse the people involved or whatever, and you soon realize what's going on,
If a non-Jew hates Jews to the extent that he has sworn to destroy them, that means you don't, who knows what that means, right? The Torah considers them part of the nation of Amalek, the arch enemy of Israel, whom the Jewish people are commanded to annihilate. Again, change that. If a Jew hates non-Jews to the extent that he has sworn to destroy them, our system considers him part of the nation of Jehovah, the arch enemy of all the rest of us, whom all of us are now commanded to annihilate. See, again, they are putting out a system there that absolutely makes them the enemy of humankind. And they're just expecting us to just lay down and say, okay, rule over us, tell us what to do, and we're just going to do nothing about it. But that's why you're seeing, Henrik, like you see in Sweden, you're seeing all these laws that are designed to prevent you from even starting to talk.
Yeah.
Because they know. Like all totalitarian systems know. Once the truth starts to get vocalized, their lies fall apart almost within a very brief part of a generation.
Now, let me ask you before we proceed there, are these not also some of the, when you hear some of the names of the people and the, I guess, tribes is a better term, that are addressed as, arch enemies, or like, smite thine enemy, or like exterminate these, or, genocide those people, that kind of language. Isn't that kind of from an outdated, are these are not around anymore, or has there been a kind of modern interpretation of this? So, for example, as you said, the Amaleks or the Meritites or whatever, they're being projected upon people that are alive today in different ethnic groups.
They're just projecting, like you and I, because we don't absolutely, because we're supposed to know better. See, we're smart people, and we don't absolutely bow down to their system. If you cross like in Syria with a Noachide, they would not for a second hesitate to kill you.
Mm-hmm.
Because in their mind, because again, we're dealing with some really dangerous, irrational, barbaric, pre-medieval thinking here. You know, this is what our Western Enlightenment tried to put under the box, you know, put it in a box and seal it.
Mm-hmm.
And all of this 9/11 OTO Noachide garbage is now unleashing it again. And this is the danger we face in the West. All of this, all of the Enlightenment period where we put all of this barbarism in a box, it's starting to make its way back into our mainstream culture.
Yeah,
And
it is.
it is.
Yeah.
And who's behind it? The Noahidists who are running Hollywood. Because it's not just Hollywood, guys. It's much of this is the Noahidists. Remember Madonna? She spent like $10 million to go to some Qaballah sect, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't just a Qaballah sect, guys. It was a Noahidist sect. Okay?
So they're kind of proselytizing and dragging influential people into this as well.
Yeah, and if I'm Madonna, okay, and I don't even believe it, right? Okay, $10 million. And I'm rich, right? And the people I'm giving the money to are backing all the elites of Hollywood. How much advertising am I going to buy for $10 million? Think about it.
Yeah.
I'm going to buy a crap load.
Quite a bit. Yeah.
Yes. And I'm going to get all the goodwill, and I'm going to get for 5-7 years. Hey, that's a cheap investment maybe.
Yeah, it's good returns on that money, you know.
Yes, yeah, and so people think, wow, she get that. Guys, come on, it's prepaid advertising. Grow up. Grow up. This is the real world. She's just paying for advertising. And everyone's like, oh, come on, no, really. So there's this whole thing. Really, the Noahide law, it was actually passed into U.S. law in 1993. Did you know that?
Tell us about that.
This came out. It's called Education Day, March 26th, actually 1991, Education Day. And it says here, like, whereas Congress recognizes the historical tradition of ethical values and principles which are the basis of civilized society and upon which our great nation was founded, and whereas these ethical values and principles have been the bedrock of society from the dawn of civilization when they were known as the 7 Noahide laws.
Really? Huh.
And that was signed in, and now and it's interesting about Education Day, because it's like the whole point to the Noahide system is that Jews are pretty much commanded to educate us about how we must all bow down to the Noahide laws. That's kind of like the whole, in a nutshell. I'm oversimplifying this only for the audience here, because once you go do your research, you're just going to be probably like me, disgusted.
So just to read here, the 1991 bill described the Noahide laws as the, quote, ethical values and principles which are the basis of civilized society and upon which our great nation, United States, was founded, unquote. Interesting.
Yeah. And it's like, but guys, this is a fairy tale. Because you already know from the Epic of Gilgamesh that the Jewish version is just a crockpot piece of literature. Yet here you're trying to make all Western civilization based upon a fairy tale written in some mind of some Jewish guy 1,600 years ago. And they're going to base our Western society on that? What an absolute frigging insult to all of us who are a part of reason in the West. Because that's an insult. Who are you guys to actually come to us and tell us that somehow our Western esoteric traditions are anywhere near rooted in the barbarism of Judaism? Go to Palestine. Just understand what Jews have done to Palestine.
Sure, yeah.
Understand the barbarism of Judaism, guys.
Yeah.
This is Judaic culture manifested, and look what we get. Perpetual war, perpetual death, an absolute militarized state, a delusional population. Who wants any part of this as we move forward in the 21st to 22nd century?
Tell us more about the 7 laws that are listed then, and how these contradict to, you know, the application that we're seeing, because yeah,
it's all basic stuff, you know. Let me pull them up here. First, they call it universal morality. And this is coming off the Chabad website. There's lots of different websites out there, of course, you can pull this from. They're going about the Talmud, 70 families. And again, it depends on the translation. You have to go get a lot of different translations to really understand the nature of it. Like Chabad, they kind of simplify it. They don't really tell you how just diabolical this really is, but their second law, respect the Creator. As frustrated and angry as you may be, do not vent it. Again, that is not the law. See, Qaballah is trying to hide reality here because they're giving their own commentary. I don't want to hear your commentary, dude. Give me the law. See what I mean? Just give me I don't want your commentary. What? I don't need you to teach me. I can read my English. Believe me. Just give me the law. So Qaballah, for instance, if you go to the Qaballah site, you're not getting really what's going on here. Respect, like law number 5, respect the rights and properties of others. Well, no, the law says don't steal. Don't steal. Well, yeah. What? This is supposed to be a big enlightened thing from
Revelation. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Wow, you guys, come on, give us a break. What do you think? This is a huge universe. And here's the interesting thing about the 7 Noachide laws. You've got respect for God's creatures. Like, don't eat a live animal. Don't bite into an animal while it's still alive. Huh? Really, huh? I mean, come on. And these are supposed to be enlightened people, and they get all the power. They're locked into the power structures of this planet. And yet, one of their basic laws is don't eat an animal while it's still alive.
Right, yeah.
Okay, I guess the only people I know who might do that are Eskimos, where they'll take a fish out of the water and they'll start to eat it while it's still alive.
Right, yeah. So they're out, so let's pick them off.
Yeah, that's take care of the Inuit. I do know that in China you've got some pretty barbaric eating habits. Okay, that'll take that out. So yeah, it's barbaric. Let me find something that's actually really good for you, because there's so much interesting stuff about it. I'll tell you. I had it all ready to go before the show, too, believe it or not. But how we just click from window to window to window.
Oh, yeah.
But, like, number one, like, don't kill. I mean, duh.
Well, that's usually what it is, right? It's a lot of these kind of no shit kind of things going on here, you know. But what I found interesting here, of course, is, for example, one of them is the prohibition of sexual immorality. I don't see that we're seeing that in the world today, you know. So there are contradictions here.
Yeah, exactly. Here's another interesting thing about that one, because if you look at Hollywood, we're going to have to behead virtually all of Jewish culture. Okay, but the Jews have a response for this, because there's a whole segment within their philosophic, because again, these are just a bunch of rabbis just blabbering back and forth with each other, thinking they're important on the global stage at the end of it, or let's just call it the larger human, you know what I mean? Not just the planet Earth, but I'm talking about the universe at large. I mean, these guys are just huge. You got to see the latest movie. But they're talking about how this rabbi says, well, Jews are supposed to abide by the laws. And this rabbi's arguing, no, Jews don't have to abide by the law. And they've got you get a headache reading up on just how one side says Jews are supposed to abide by the laws and other Jews aren't supposed to abide by them. So they don't even agree whether Jews have to abide by it, but you darn well better abide by it. Now, if this doesn't sound like this New World Order top-down command structure of tyranny, I don't know what is. It is.
Yeah.
This is what it is. This is top-down. This is nothing short of this New World Order command tyranny. Top-down tyranny. And with Jews at the top, and let's be honest, guys, Jews were massively complicit in 9/11, but we can't touch them. Because part of their system is they are not bound by the same rules that we are. So while they can go torture Masui and pretend like he's the mastermind, yeah, right, guys, what a stupid insult that was. If I'm part of U.S. intelligence, I'm embarrassed. Okay? I'm embarrassed. This is the best we can do. We spend $44 billion in intelligence. The best I can do is torture Masui and say, oh, I'm the mastermind. It looks like he's had his head fried with microwaves. See, this whole system really is all about Jews can do what they want, but we can never go after them with the court of law, because they're not subject to our courts, only their courts. We're subject to their courts, but they're not subject to our courts. In fact, under the Noachide system, us poor goys, we are supposed to create court systems that integrate Noachide law into the systems. So when you see a lot of these laws being passed, really, I'm talking about real structured laws inside of your political system, you should start to be aware of just the Noachide angle and say, hey, is this part of this globalized strategy of top-down tyranny?
Yeah. Interesting.
Because you see so many of these laws where, again, in a Noachide system, you can't even criticize a Jew. This is against the law. See, because it's not just the 7 laws, but then they create a whole bunch of regulations under the laws.
Yeah, so that was, again, go back to Palestine, and that situation would be tremendously beneficial there if this is actually something, I mean, it sounds insane, of course, but if this was something to be put in the legal framework of, around the globe, basically, that would be, give them a blank kind of ability here to do whatever they want. And maybe that's why we're seeing the continuation of the terror against the Palestinians with no kind of bigger reaction, really, from the rest of the world,
Oh, and the interesting point is that the Noachide Chabad movement is the movement behind the Israeli settler movement.
Yeah, right.
Okay? This is the group that is behind it. I remember talking to an Israeli years ago, and I said, this Chabad Lubavitch, most likely they're the ones behind 9/11. They're people, like Pearl, Wolfowitz, and all of these people, the rectified goys like Bush and Cheney and some of these others, they're behind this. I said, well, they're the most radical, insane people within all of Jewish society. I said, yeah, but they're the ones controlling America. He said, well, if that's the case, then this world's in for a very dark ride.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think this woman was telling the truth, because we've seen the world we've been plunged into a very dark ride the last 12 years. And it's not getting better.
No, I agree, Hey, by the way, another side note here, but I obviously thought it was interesting with the themes of Noah and all that stuff, from where this comes from in terms of the survival of the flood myth and all that, but the rainbow symbol and the rainbow flag overall, right? That according to the Bible, God first created the rainbow as a sign to Noah that there would never again be a worldwide flood. But yeah, we definitely seen the use of the rainbow flag in a lot of settings lately. That is interesting.
Yes, the symbols it is, and there's lots of people out there that do symbol work. You know what I mean? And I'm sure you've had some of them on your show. It is interesting. I like to read some of the stuff about the symbols in Hollywood, but at the same time, I'm tired of it.
Yeah,
because I like dealing with the geopolitics, so we need to make change.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It's all good. It's all good and well looking for for the pyramid in the and the eye behind the character there in a few millisecond shot, and that's all well and good. But aren't they missing the main propaganda that's right in their face, which is the content of the actual movie, as opposed to just the symbols that appear in it? There's like a whole deconstruction and erosion of the Western world occurring within the subversive messages of our pop culture. That would be the primary motive, I would think. But of course, people are free to focus and look at what they want.
What is it, Voltaire, he said, to know who, what's that phrase? To
learn who rules over you, simply find out who you're not allowed to criticize.
Yes, that is probably one of the most brilliant, simple statements out there. Yeah. I've got these 7 laws, by the way. Do not deny God, whatever that might be. Do not blaspheme God. Do not murder. Do not engage in incestuous, adulterous, or homosexual relationships. Well, that's going to wipe out all of Hollywood, isn't it? Do not steal. Do not eat a live animal. Oh, yeah, I've always had a desire to do that. And, of course, really the key here is number 7. Establish courts, legal systems to ensure law obedience. Again, the whole thing is about putting down a top-down tyranny system with basically Jews at the head. And I know that sounds like an oversimplification, but really look into these laws and you'll find that that's right, all Jews are commanded essentially to create the conditions for this, because they believe that once this global system of tyranny is in place, that's when their God's going to come down. That's when the Moshiach happens.
Yeah. So people are, for example, very happy to talk about the insanity of, Christians and the rapture and all this kind of stuff, or let's say even like, Sharia law or whatnot. But here's another yet another example of the Abrahamic religions and the insanity of the way that they're trying to impose their belief system upon others. And really at the root of it then a very racist system that places one group above everyone else, and it's their right to dictate to them because they're, what, like a lower animal or something like that, you know?
Yes. Let me give you some Hermetic Kabbalistic plays. We talked about puns in the language. They kind of like hint at the insanity of Jewish thinking. Okay? There's the idea in the Sefer Yetzirah of words going left to right and right to left. And we can see that in the languages. English goes from left to right, and the Hebrew, Arabic goes from right to left. Okay? Well, if it's going like right to left or left to right, it's supposed to be like live is good, evil reversed is bad, right?
Yeah.
Okay, let's say that this system has its merit in some ways in construction of words. Well, welcome in Arabic is marhaba, welcome. Marhaba, which is eerily very close to the reverse Abraham, which would mean not welcome. Not welcome. They talk about Ain being the primal one, the very first. Yet the past tense of Ain is ain't. These are just some of the puns in the words. I actually had more that I wanted to bring up, but that one kind of like took my brain away. But there's lots of just different puns about this. When you look out into the system, if you're willing to look, I'm sorry, I don't have one or two more for you.
Oh, it's okay. So this manifests itself in English in different ways as a kind of a clear message, really, about what is going on, which of course is very interesting, and this might be to a certain extent very very intentional, or to a certain extent it might be just kind of part of the metaphysical overlay of things of how it kind of plays out, I guess.
Like monotheism. Well, has anybody ever stopped to think what the is? Because if it's mono the, what is the? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Think about it, because if you're saying, because here I'm looking from J-Law, Jewish law, monotheism and fundamentals of Jewish law. Jewish law presupposes that there is just one God, and that such a deity is the sole God in the heavens and the earth. Okay, fine, but what's monotheism? What is the? What is the? Well, the is an obvious code if you have the code system in play. T is located at 4. The sum of 1 to 4 is 10. H is located at 8. It's a compound sound. 8, the sum of 1 to 8 is 36. 10 times 36 is 360 plus 5 is 365 days a year. So the is talking about the sun. So now what exactly are you Jews talking about? I don't know. Well, don't tell me about monotheism. Now give me a word that works. Because what you're telling me is that there's only one sun in the sky. Yeah, we know that. Go. Just go. We know that God has a value of 7 plus 15 plus 4, which is 26 weeks. We know that that is the correlational diameter in time of, let's say, winter solstice to summer solstice, spring equinox. We're now in the fall equinox. Today is as we're recording, right?
Yeah, is it? Yeah.
Yeah, today actually. Yeah, 26 weeks. Oh, so there's 26 weeks. We know that death then must be the correlational diameter because, again, we're dealing with the pi system. If you really want to get to the truth of the matter relative to the construct or the construct of humanity, you must understand why. Why is a question. It's also a letter, the 25th letter of the alphabet. And we know that the golden triangle is 3 squared plus 4 squared equals 5 squared, which is I plus B equals Y, which is pi. Understand why. Remember the matrix. The only point is to understand why. Well, why is a letter in a question? Understand how it's constructed, how it works. The I, think about that, V, right? When you make a Y, you got a V and a 1. Mm-hmm. Right? Mm-hmm. Okay, the 1 is Adam. This is the male. The V is Eve. Just V backwards is Eve, Adam and Eve. This is seen at the Temple of Sukkot in Indonesia. Very clear within the ancient system, because we know the ancient systems, they kept this system in play. What has monotheism in the Jewish format done to humanity? Yeah. Everywhere it goes, it destroys the evidence.
Yeah.
Everywhere it goes. its sole purpose is to destroy the evidence of our past to leave only their system in play in the future.
Yeah, yeah. And my God, haven't we seen that, huh? God, in terms of its expansion, and and I would include Christianity in that, and all the Abrahamic religions, really, in the way that they've expanded, and I certainly know that from the Nordic perspective, and the way that was imposed on us, and the people who represented the old ways were dealt with ferociously.
Exactly. Yeah, Christianity was certainly far more beneficial than raw Talmudism, raw Judaism, but it's still tainted with the wolf, as we say. I like to look at the tale of like the three pigs. Remember?
Mm-hmm.
You had the first pig. He built a house of straw, and it's blown down. This is like the kingdom of Egypt. And then you have the second one. He builds it out of a wood. Wood we can equate to a table and the tablets. This is blown down. And then the third wolf, or the third pig, he builds it out of stone. Well, brick. Jesus was known to be like the brick. He worshipped the brick. This is an old tale from like 300 A.D. So this is about Jesus. This one is this philosophy is about Jesus. The wolf, meaning this Jehovah character, he goes down the chimney and the pig devours it, which means he now partakes some of the elements of Judaism. So Christianity is unfortunately a toxic blend of the good Osirian schools, which it originally was founded on, and the Judaism, which absolutely corrupts it.
So let me ask you this. If this is a religious, kind of delusional concept, which, despite if people themselves believe in this or not, could pose, obviously, a tangible, real threat if there's indeed powerful people with influence behind it that have resources and money and everything else that are convinced in the application of these laws. But the bigger question here, of course, is what is the way out of that? How do we fight such a thing?
Obviously, awareness is the first step, and then once you have awareness, in my opinion, the brain, the mass of society will come up with the solutions acceptable to the society. My solution would be to shut down all of the organized schools. The same thing they did to the Gulen movement in Turkey. This poses an existential threat to Western civilization. Shut down the schools. Shut down the entire movement. Nationalize its assets. Anybody that is involved in the political system should be rooted out, purged, because obviously they're working in the political system for one reason, to advance the Noachide system.
Well, yeah, so sorry, hold that thought. I just want to mention that as well. But see, then, I mean, it's an existential threat to the West, just as you said, to reemphasize that. But see, then people reacted in this way. Well, see, then it's fascism, then it's tyranny, then it's authoritarianism if we tell other people what to do and what to live. We're kind of in that political sphere and environment right now where it's wait, hold on, let me just finish that point. And then they say, well, they tote human rights, and they say all these kinds of things, and they say it's my right to be a subversive and corrosive force in society. I think that the West in particular has not learned to, we did it before, but we haven't learned to defend ourselves against these kinds of things, and people run right away to the idea that it doesn't have the right to defend itself. I think that's been imposed on us on a political, ideological basis as well, so that we can't put up a fight against these kinds of things.
Yeah, well, you've called it. We're programmed to not put up a fight. But then again, they're saying it's okay for us to impose our tyranny upon you.
Exactly, of course.
They're saying this is okay, and you must accept that. Well, then, okay, we accept that. Now it's also then you must accept it's okay for us, since you don't believe in our system of just letting people be themselves and developing spiritually, then it's up to all of these people to impose their tyranny upon you. I mean, it's a two-way street. If you want to impose your tyranny on this group of people, that group of people has every right to impose their tyranny upon you.
Yeah, to respond, to defend themselves against this. I guess the only problem here is that people don't realize that this is posing a threat to them,
Well, that's it. And most people, as you know, they're watching TV, they're watching the latest show. They're not aware that there's an organized religious Talmudic system working against their interests every second of every day.
Yeah.
And it is no joke. You've got Sanhedrin courts. They've already established their Sanhedrin courts. So to them, boy, they're making huge progress here.
Yeah.
They've got education day already enshrined into law. They're working hard every day to bring about what can only be described as Talmudic tyranny.
Jeez. Yeah, it's yeah, that's insane. Where are all the atheists now? You know, speaking out against this. It's funny, huh? The scientific, rationally minded people of the West, you know, but again, they haven't realized that this is an agenda, because it's to a certain extent hidden and secret to most people, because they don't look deep enough, basically.
Yeah, and the problem is the agenda is hidden inside of a veneer of Jewish mysticism. And that mysticism is protected by people's fear of being called an anti-Semite.
Absolutely. Yeah, of course.
So there's this big like mesmer spell that's protecting this in this bubble right now. And although we can hit it, we can't crack it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
We maybe put a spark against it, you know, and agitate them. Certainly you've agitated some people, because you've been banned from certain sites, and they've done what they can now to control, you know, put their tyranny on you. You know what I mean? Yeah, if it's everything's fair, why are you being blackballed in certain areas?
Mm-hmm.
Am I being blackballed in certain, you know, again, so this idea of, human rights, come on, blow it out of you. You know what, dude? Because you don't play by these rules either.
Well, that's what I think people fail to realize, that there's a reason why certain movements in the history of the world has come about, because they needed to be. Yes, it was harsh. Yes, it was, not the best conditions for everybody. But at some point, you need structure and order. You need defense in place. Otherwise, everything will just fall apart and crumble. You know.
Look at your country. It's a very small country. It was always considered, at least to those of us who are Western, to be filled with beautiful, kind, warm people. Now, what do you have?
Yeah, it's all backwards.
Allowed to even defend yourselves.
Yeah.
They are creating laws that prevent you even from defending yourself. I tell you what, if I'm a nationalist and I'm young, and I'm a nationalist, whoever wrote those laws, they're on a list, buddy.
Yeah.
They are on a list, and they are not going to like what comes when the political tide changes. Who are you to sell our country out?
Yeah. These are traitors of the highest order, you know.
The highest order, and they should be called out for that.
Yeah, I agree.
Stop panic, cowering that, because they're going to do what they're going to do to you anyway. So you might as well get up and fight.
Yeah.
Look what they did to you. Right? They took away a certain market. It didn't matter whether sure, you could have stayed talking about aliens all day, but you're not going to get anywhere.
Well, these are, you go on the paths you go, and you realize that there's, a lot of interesting stuff out there, but you realize soon enough, just as you said before, if you, to learn who rules over you, find out who you're not allowed to criticize. There's certain resistance, that just automatically is in place as soon as you begin to even just question something or talk about it or investigate it. We're not even advocating anything. We're just looking at it, and it's absolute. They're fearful. They're horrified over the prospect of people just looking at this stuff, Amazing, huh?
And it is, but I can assure you, the Qaballah I put together relative to English is exceedingly shrewd. I'll put this out there on the air with confidence. It's shrewd. It is designed in a Taoist mentality. Now, what the Taoists believe is when you have a disease, diseases are energy. It's a type of resonance. And to get rid of that disease, you must create counter spells that counter the energy of the disease. So let's say arthritis, and I know people who do know, but let's say arthritis is wood, yang, fire, yang of yin, like this, and they create this whole energetical structure of the disease. Then they'll create an herbal formula that is the exact opposite of that energetical structure. Then when they give the herbal product, that herbal concoction, that herbal remedy to the patient, within 3 to 7 days, a good healer will just clear out the disease. Good one. These are natural diseases. Now, unnatural diseases like poisoning from mercury, from vaccines, those take months and months to try to redo.
Yeah.
Those are very difficult.
If not years,
If not years, because those aren't natural diseases. Those are unnatural.
Yeah.
That's man-induced disease. So that has a different structure, and it's not so easy. But any natural disease has its own natural remedy or cure, and that could be done. Now, when it comes to Qaballah, what everyone must understand is that much of the weapons employed to this day remain words.
Yeah, certainly.
So what we had to do is create the Kabbalistic structure to create the ability to reverse engineer the word and then create a counter spell that just neutralizes it. For instance, a Nazi. How many times have you been called a Nazi?
Right. Yeah.
But you know when they call you a Nazi is when you start to see what's going on. Think about it. Every time you start to see something, someone comes along to say you're a Nazi.
Or to shut it down right away. Yeah.
And then guess what? The spell works. You don't see anymore. Right? People, they stop seeing. They stop looking. So it's an effective Kabbalistic spell. The Germans never called themselves Nazis.
Right. Yeah.
This is a fabricated word. It's a Kabbalistic constructed word. So what then is the countermeasure to a Nazi? No, I see very well, thank you. Because I do see. Don't tell me I not see. I do see. Okay?
Right.
And then they just go livid on you, but you can smile now because you have a counter spell. Where before you had none. Every time someone calls me a Nazi, I said, no, I see fine. What do you mean I don't see? And then they'll look confused because they don't understand you're playing with their head. Because they don't understand that there's a very high-level power that created the Nazi spell that's trying to play with your head. So why not play with their head back?
Sure. Yeah.
Because it's spells. I mean, again, it's just words.
Yeah, it is, and that it really it shapes, it forms the mental landscape, it creates and inhibits behavior in the real world. I mean, it's very, very powerful.
Yes, or an anti-Semite. What the heck is that? Now, I don't even, when you're hit with the word, you're an anti-Semite. What is that? I don't understand what you mean. Because I don't want to project the archetype that they've presented to me into the words anymore. So I will just stop and say, I don't understand what you mean. Because I'm not going to take the projections they created for me in my head and throw it into the word. And then I feel that. Because that's what they do. They will create over time the archetype. Anti-Semite means you're someone who believes in 6 million Jews were gassed. Give me a break, dude. I don't believe that at all. I think that's a big hoax. Right? So the point here is we need, again, to create these Kabbalistic spells to reverse engineer the spells that a very high-level power working through the Jewish people, in my opinion, are putting on us. In other words, this is a transdimensional war of evil versus good. It's not just Jews. Jews aren't that smart. Actually, they're kind of stupid. Think about it. I mean, they still believe in Noah. How smart is that? Honestly, that's not very smart.
Yeah, but there definitely is a difference between, what should we call it, dedicated religious delusion and IQ to a certain extent as well. But I get what you're saying, though. I hear you.
Smart. I know. I think you've had Kevin McDonald on recently or something to that effect. He was on my show the other day, and we talked about the higher education and how Jews have a very IQ, 145, but it's falling. But you know what? Like if you can have 235 Chabad schools, right? 235 Chabad schools, and the only people who can go to these schools are the very wealthiest of the Jewish society. So guess what? They go to a Chabad school just like we could have gone, let's say 20, 30, 40 years ago to a good Catholic school.
Right.
And now we don't have to do. The Chabad guys and gals, the little boys and girls, they don't have to deal with some African American in the back just disrupting and being rude all day. Because there's a big problem within the African American community. I don't care what they tell me. There is a big problem. Yet if you're a white student and you're in this school and you're forced integration, now you're having to deal with all this cultural BS around you while the Jewish student is able to coast through the school system. So when he comes out the other end, maybe he's not so worldly in the way of the culture, the popular culture, but he comes out with this mentality. He's elite. He's better than everybody else. And because he wasn't getting disrupted the whole time, he does come out a bit smarter.
Right, yeah.
So there's a stacked deck going on.
Yeah, and as we know as well, a lot of the IQ is hereditary as well. So even if you actually, I think there have been studies on younger children that they can actually raise their IQ in conditions where they have a good education during certain years, but then studies, I guess, seem to indicate that there's actually a fallback later on in life, and you kind of retain that anyway. But certainly, of course, application of that education is very important on top of things, just to to understand what's going on, or get involved in pushing an agenda or what have you. But that's very interesting. It means that they are allowed to have their segregation and their elite schools,
yep.
Something which has been denied to Westerners, specifically the American elite universities, who were built by European Americans.
Or they're forcing the integration on the kids. I mean, you have communities that are solid, and they're forcing kids from one community to be bussed into another community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, at gunpoint, as we know in the beginning, so.
Yeah. So many issues, It's a big problem out there. Obviously, there's not an easy solution. People need to become obviously more politically involved, ask questions, get involved in the local school boards, kick these guys out. Do anything you can, of course. Do like you and I, get out there, try to educate, raise awareness, because always mankind has, I think, what do you call that, self-defense, an immune system against a virus. And this is a virus of the spirit. You know what I mean? It's a virus of our human spirit.
Yeah.
It's not just it's a virus. It's something about this is almost non-human. Because how can you do what you did how can you do what like the U.S. military does, which is run by essentially our Jewish elites now in America? How can you do that to a country? How can you do what you did in, let's say, Palestine? This is not human. Yeah. There's not something not human about this. Because how would we humans go about doing that? We wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
So there's got to be something, something transdimensional or something that's got a hold of these people, and they just believe they are so far superior to the rest of us. And they're very smart. They're very well connected. They have a lot of money. But at the end of the day, we leave our fairy tales as children behind. But the Jewish people do not.
Well, this has been very interesting. Definitely some new concepts here. Why don't we pick up this another time as well and continue to talk more about this? I know that there's a lot more to it, and we can tie this into, certainly other ongoings of what we see today play out, and relationships between the West and how the Middle East is being played and everything else. But yeah, definitely, Dennis. This has been great having you back. Please let us know if there's something you'd like to round up on, thoughts here at the closing. And if not, of course, give us the details as well about where people can. Have you written anything in particular on what we've been talking about here in the second hour? Is there more material for people to dig into this, or is it primarily through your radio shows you've been talking about this, Dennis?
Just through the radio show. Like you, I'm busy. As you know, radio shows take a lot of time to prepare.
They do, yeah.
Just radio show, and you can catch that every Saturday, 10 o'clock Eastern, USA, on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, but really just go to InsideTheEyeLive.com. You can click on the links from there. Again, if you want to get the Kabbalistic information, this is honest. I'm not kidding you, Henrik. It is designed using Taoist metanumerics to create counter spells against the Kabbalistic spells that are aimed at all of us. Literally all of us. And so that it's a very high level resource. I guarantee you, Talmudists, like within Ginsburg's office. He's the big rabbi now for the Noachide sects. Noachide rabbis have taken my spells, my craft inside for analysis, and they actually wrote a treatise like in 2009 about it, saying, okay, this is all false doctrine, blah, 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 blah. I'm false. You're right, I'm false. But at least they took it seriously.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
They did, and then I do know, certain people have been blackballed again from Hollywood because Hollywood uses Kabbalism all the time.
Yeah, sure.
Sure they do, because this is part of controlling the mind. And when they found out that people were learning under my system, they've actually been kicked out of Hollywood. So I do know it has a power. Just through, ancillary knowledge, things getting back to me. But, let's do it again. It's a great show. Great to be back. Great to be back. By the way, I have this to say about Facebook. Okay? Because I only view Facebook on my mobile. Okay? And I use a Samsung S4, I think. Yeah, the S4, right? I don't know if you've noticed this, but I find this kind of sinister. When you push the return button to go back to the previous page, just above it is the touch screen check-in. So every now and then you accidentally hit the check-in button, trying to go back a screen.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of diabolical because I'm not stupid. They're putting that there for a reason so that you are updating your location every now and then. And I don't know how to turn the darn thing off on the mobile. I'm not paranoid, but I'm just pragmatic.
Right. Yeah.
Every now and then when I hit it, somebody in Tel Aviv is saying, "Oh, that son of a bitch." Yeah, I see now.
Yeah, definitely. Well, we linked up a story on that not too long ago. It's absolutely right that they know what they're doing there, But for guys who want to check it out, InsideTheEyeLive.com, that's the website. Also, IlluminatusObserver.blogspot.com. But as I said, great having you back, Dennis. Thank you so much for doing it, and let's definitely stay in touch, and we'll have you back again, okay?
Thanks so much. Look forward to it.
All right, that's our program for today with Dennis Fetcho. Thank you for listening. My thanks to the team, and thank you for your membership. We have, of course, more coming in just a few days. In the meantime, we say stay well and stay up to date at redicecreations.com and redicemembers.com. And as a member, of course, subscribe to our RSS members feeds with your computer and or portable devices to get the updates right to you. Have a good day or evening, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.